Adam, I don't think 2-2 Carolina and 1-3 Clemson was necessarily expected for this game. Although I am fully on board of I don't think the 2-2 for the Tar Heels is necessarily an enormous shock to the system. I do think the way Carolina has looked against the two power conference opponents it has played is certainly not what the Heels would like. And Clemson, the 1-3 start, I do think is surprising. This is a team that was in the top 5 in the preseason polls, the clear-cut favorite in the ACC in the preseason. But it has been a tough go. A lot of close games. Clemson lost to LSU by a touchdown. Had to have a big comeback against Troy to win that game. Lost on a last-second field goal against Georgia Tech. And then kind of got handled a little bit by Syracuse in a game where Syracuse's quarterback ended up getting hurt. And unfortunately for them, he's out the rest of the year. But the Orange had already built such a lead, and there was this weird weather delay. And so by the time they finished the game, like nobody was there anymore. It was a strange game for sure. But it doesn't change the fact, unexpected 1-3 start to the season for the Tigers. Adam, I want to go big picture Carolina first, and then we'll hammer in on this particular matchup. This story is going to be the same story for the Tar Heels until something different occurs. And that is Carolina has to be more consistent offensively. That they've got to have the ball more. They've got to score more points. They've got to be more balanced. They have to hit some chunk plays. They have to protect the football. Not that turnovers have been a huge issue, but the ones they've had against the good teams have hurt them. All of that is number one on the list. I think defensively for the Tar Heels, and Adam, this is easy for me to say and harder to do. Yeah, I think Carolina has been okay. I don't think the Tar Heels are the best defense in the nation, but I think they've been pretty good. Where they have run into trouble is against these better teams. I do think they've worn down throughout the game. Both some of the fact that they haven't been able to get off the field as much as they would like on 3rd and 4th down, and some of that is they're on the field a lot also because the offense is struggling. And so how can the defense be most effective and stay consistently effective, not just through the first, 40% of the game, 50% of the game, whatever it is? I think those two things are going to be relevant topics for Carolina until we see something different.
Yeah. It's hard to know exactly what improvements you can make offensively when you have the personnel that you have. It's not like the Tar Heels can go make a trade for Omarion Hampton. So it must just be a matter of figuring out how to use these pieces more effectively. The Tar Heels just are not very explosive right now. And I think that's part of the reason why the turnovers seem so big, even though there's not many of them, because it's just hard to do stuff offensively. And anytime that you feel like you're starting to do stuff and then you turn the ball over, it's like, it's going to take a lot of work to get to that point again. So we don't know exactly who will be taking the snaps under center, but whoever it is, the Tar Heels are going to need to throw the ball down the field a little more and just find a way to keep the defense honest. Because I think there's 4 games on film now, so defenses know that the Tar Heels aren't a secret. They know what Carolina has tried to do and what they've been limited in doing, and Clemson has very good players. So you've got to figure out a way to do something about that. And then defensively, complementary football is something people talk about a lot here the last couple of years. Carolina's kind of playing uncomplimentary football right now because the defense has been pretty good, but the offense hasn't helped them, and that sometimes makes the defense look worse because they have been on the field for a long time and they are having to do a lot of things. And I mean, you'll even hear Gavin Gibson talk about the defense needing to score points. The defense isn't supposed to do that. It's nice if they can, but it's supposed to be a bonus, not like a strategy to win the game. So this is the rare case, I think, where there's a football team that has some issues, and the issues are pretty simple. A lot of times we say, well, it's a lot of things. Carolina needs to play better on offense, and they need to figure out a way to gain more yards, score more points, hold the ball for longer, all those things, and that's the task.
I do think Carolina getting healthier on the offensive line would be beneficial. Losing Christo Kelly and Austin Blasky early in training camp was a challenge. Blasky came back and played in the game against UCF, but actually played tackle because of some other issues that the Heels were having. And so Bill Belichick talked about this in his press conference on Tuesday, but when you have all of your pieces available, figuring out who your best five are and figuring out the combo of your best five. So maybe your five most talented aren't necessarily the best combo of five, and whatever that combo of five is, and then the two or three guys that you want to rotate in addition to that, figuring that out and having some continuity there, you have to figure is going to help. I just think it hasn't been the number one problem, but it has been part of the issue, I think, for Carolina offensively. So to hopefully get some more health and continuity up front would be beneficial. I do also wonder, with this really unique schedule, just the one game in 27 days, can you change more if you feel like more needs to be changed than you traditionally would be able to, because you do have so much time to work with. From coaches to players have talked a lot about how Carolina did a ton of fundamental work in the first open date last week, and just trying to really hammer down on some of that. Coach Belichick talked a lot about it on the radio show on Monday night. Hope you found that in your podcast feed, by the way, and listen to that if you wanted to. Gavin Gibson's going to mention that a little bit in our conversation with him coming up in a few minutes as well. And so that clearly has been part of it. I think also the whole self-scout, what do you throw out, what do you keep, what do you have to do differently, that to me is almost more interesting to see how the Heels approach that moving forward. You can't, it's not like you're going to show up and be a whole new team, but do you approach things in a different way than you had been previously, and do you have more time to potentially do that? I think all those things are relevant questions. For Clemson itself, this is still a good football team. I mean, there are good players on this team. 1-3 is not a good record and not where Clemson wants to be, but they have a coach who's won multiple national championships. They have a quarterback who's had success against Carolina in the past and has proven to be a quality player. They do have some explosive options offensively. I think they've been inconsistent from what I've seen on the offensive side, but have also had the potential to have some big moments. And they have some familiar names. I mean, Antonio Williams, who's been injured some, but is back, good player at wide receiver. Bryant Wesco, he's only a sophomore. Carolina has not seen him before, but already 24 catches and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that's top 10 in the nation as far as receiving touchdowns at this point of the year. And Adam, I'm going to bring out a blast from the past here. Kind of got a Greg Little situation at running back. In fact, Adam Randall wears number 8, was former wide receiver, had been a solid wide receiver for them, 48 catches in his career, but they've moved him to running back. I mean, even the size, like he's 6'2", 235. Like it's a lot like when Carolina moved Little to running back there for like half a season or whatever it ended up being. And they get the ball in his hands a lot. Like, obviously just running the ball, but they use him in the pass game a bunch. He returns kicks. Just a skilled and dynamic offensive player. Again, they have not been consistent on offense. And I was talking to Coach Belichick at one point this week, and he was saying, kind of like, I think maybe UCF was the other team that he mentioned something like this, where he said they can go multiple plays in a row where they kind of don't do much, lull you to sleep, and then all of a sudden they can hit a big one. And so Carolina actually, outside of the TCU second half, has done a good job avoiding explosive play. Even the UCF game, I think UCF's longest play was maybe 22 yards in that game, or 24, which is not a huge number. So you got to avoid those. On defense, I think Clemson is good, particularly their front. They are disruptive. They're big. We talked about Carolina's offensive line a little bit earlier. That'll be a matchup to watch. By the way, Adam, I told you tip balls against UCF were going to be important, and what happened?
Yeah, I thought about that when that happened.
This game, I think Clemson tackles really well. They've just got guys who, when they hit you the play's over for the most part. So Carolina could be playing anybody this week, and I still think the main events are about the Tar Heels. Can that offense be better? Can the defense hold up for a whole game with some help from the offense? But this Clemson team, not going to be happy. 1-3, coming off an open date, talented team. This is a tall task for Carolina for sure. Heels are going to have to play better than they have to this point of this season to have a chance to win.
I think both teams coming off a bye week is interesting because you get a chance to see what the coaches on both sides decided that they have done well up to this point, which on both sides I think they would say probably they haven't done as much well as they would like, but what have they done well and what do they want to do more of? What do they want to get rid of that they've been trying to do? Like this, it's a good window into how both staffs approach this kind of thing. Clemson has played a better schedule than Carolina, but Clemson's offensive numbers are right there with Carolina.
Yes.
In a way that has concerned the Clemson fan base. They have been very vocal this week. I think Dabo Swinney called Clemson's 1-3 record a complete coaching failure.
He did indeed.
And he was including himself and the entire staff, and said just everything needs to be better, including play calling. Clemson's been in the red zone less than Carolina has. I mean, think about how little Carolina's been in the red zone. Clemson's been less. So, but again, against better competition. So, but as Joe's just told you, the Tiger offense has got a lot of players who were very productive last year. So it's not like they're incapable. It's more a matter of what aren't they doing that they did well last year. And I think that's a little concerning when you think about the bye week, because that did give them a chance. Go back and look at some tape from last year and go, hey, this was clicking. Do more of that. That's a little concerning, I think.
Carolina has run 215 plays so far this season in 4 games. That's like 54 plays a game. And the opponents have ran 272 plays. 60 more plays. That's a really big number. Some of that is the pace that Carolina has played. The Heels do not play as quickly as they have in the past. But some of that, Adam, speaks to the difficulty in sustaining drives. So, plays per game, 2019 until this year. 2019, 74 plays per game on average. 2020, 65. 2021, 69. 2022, 80 plays per game on average. 2023, 74. Last year, 68. This year, you're in the mid-50s. So, I mean, that's at the lowest number I just read was 65, and you're still running 10 fewer plays per game than that on average right now. And unfortunately, it's not because you've been so explosive that you're just having, these really huge chunk plays that are, you don't have to run a lot of plays because you're getting 60 yards or you're whatever. So it just, I think, again, some of that's the pace, it is, but some of that speaks to Carolina's just got to sustain something offensively a little more consistently. And so we'll see.
It's not. We don't mean to pile on the offense. It's not an all on offense thing. Like for example, Carolina's only got 4 sacks.
Yeah, they haven't got a ton of pressure.
Clemson's only allowed 4 sacks.
Yeah, and Klubnik can really run.
So that is a concern. It's something Carolina's got to do better, but it's something that even this, quote, complete coaching failure Clemson team has not allowed their opponents to do. So you're probably not going to get a ton of pressure. You're going to have to make – so your Gavin Gibsons are going to have to make some plays in the secondary.
Klubnik in that ACC championship game 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, 20 of 24, 279 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions, rushed for 30 yards and a touchdown, caught a pass on a trick play for 19 yards. In the game in Death Valley in 2023, 21 of 32, 219 yards, a touchdown, 44 yards rushing, and a touchdown as well. So he's been good against Carolina. Now, different defense, obviously, whole different everything. But he's been good against the Tar Heels in the past. And Adam, Clemson sneakily, I mean, they've won 6 straight in this series. They've won 9 of the last 10. Now, these two teams haven't played very often, although they've played more often here recently. A win for Clemson would equal the longest win streak they've ever had against the Tar Heels, which would be 7 in a row. Carolina has not won against the Tigers since Johnny White and the Heels in 2010. Won at 21-16 in Chapel Hill. And just in going back and looking, Carolina should have won in 2023. They were up 7-0. Hampton, who had not fumbled all year, remember, fumbled on the goal line when it looked like he had run for a long touchdown. They did a long review. I still think it was a questionable overturn. If you'd have called it a fumble on the field, I think you stick with it. I was stunned they changed it, but that took away a touchdown. He fumbled again in the red zone later in the half. Again, had not fumbled all year, and obviously a terrific player, one of the best running backs Carolina's ever had, and that's saying something. But he had 2 fumbles in the red zone in the first half. Carolina picked off a pass in the end zone and had it nullified by a roughing the passer call. Clemson scored a touchdown on that drive later on. Carolina dominated that first half in Death Valley and was down 14-7. And that was just, the air was out of the balloon. They ended up losing, I think it was 31-20 after that. So none of that matters for this game. Just a little bit of a history lesson of what has happened between these two teams recently. And it's going to be a big challenge. Of course, there was the game in 2019 when Clemson came in number 1 in the country and Carolina played them to the very end, win for 2, and didn't get it in the final seconds. But it's going to be, to your point, Adam, both. What do these two teams look like? How do they look? How have they gotten better in what they wanted to keep doing, and what are they doing differently? And from our perspective, talking about the Tar Heels, I think particularly for Carolina, it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Clemson's 1-5 in its last 6 against Power 4 and 3-6 in its last 9 against Power 4 teams, and averaging right at 20 points per game in those games.
That's a surprising number.
Well, and a couple of those wins are last second. I mean, the Tigers have stumbled some here over these last couple seasons. That doesn't mean they're ripe for defeat. I mean, they're playing good teams. These are Power 4 teams. But this is not the Clemson of the one that came into Kenan Stadium.
Right.
So, we'll see.
Adam, before we get to basketball, anything else football-wise that we need to hit on here?
Ludicrous Saturday morning.
10 o'clock.
Can't wait.
Looking forward to it. Should be. I still think it's going to be a great day in Chapel Hill. I mean, I think the atmosphere is going to be really good.
Weather, good.
Yep. But the Tar Heels need to start playing better. And, Adam, we talked to, again, the radio show on Monday. Coach Belichick was there for 35 minutes or so of the hour. And, you know, we talked a lot about kind of the long-term process here. And I know these sound like excuses, and I know nobody wants to hear excuses. But I do think there are a couple relevant things that happened in this sequence. Doesn't mean Carolina doesn't want to play better, because the Tar Heels do want to and do need to. I do think the fact that, Coach Belichick, when he was hired, the portal was already open. The first recruited, the recruiting class was essentially complete. And that's not unusual when there's a coaching change. It's hard for everybody. But I do think, especially with him coming into college for the first time, I just think all of that was a challenge. I think the fact that Carolina went through spring with a team that looks nothing like the team that Carolina has now, you almost lost it was almost a useless spring for Carolina. Not 100%, but I think just a lot of guys that went through practice that for one reason or another aren't on the team anymore. And then as we've talked about, you brought in a lot of guys who are key players in the spring portal window. The newness of all the stuff that we know. I do think it was more of a challenge than anybody maybe thought it was going to be to get all of this moving in the right direction with that much upheaval. So it is important for Carolina for a lot of reasons, I think, to just keep getting better. It's important for this season. It's important to show that you're making progress. They do have a very large and good recruiting class coming in. They're working to prove that even more. I think they probably have a better feel on how to most effectively use the portal. And that's an ever-evolving process, of course, for everybody. But it is important to continue to get better. I don't think you can run out there and look like you looked against UCF for the rest of the year and have any type of feelings that you want to have going into the offseason.
And at the same time, I think even the coaches would acknowledge that when you're asking people to invest at the level that people invested in football this year, the timeline gets shortened on how quickly they get frustrated.
Sure.
And I think everybody involved understands that because people did invest a ton this year. And they're ready to see some returns, and hopefully that starts Saturday at noon.